It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. It's a bit of a funky show today. In that, I don't know if Russell was joking or not at the end of his show about there's a lot going on. I'm guessing he was joking. This is one of the most barren, weird sports days I can remember in a long, long time. There are so many days we come in and it feels like we're drinking from an absolute fire hose. Certainly the first part of this month with NFL free agency, felt like there was stuff happening. And for all I know, there could be a story that goes kaboom at some point during the show. And everything I'm about to say to set up the rest of the show is rendered moot. But as we sit here right now at 4:03 Eastern time, there ain't a lot going on. We're kind of in the midweek lull of the NCAA tournaments. Women's tournament we talked about a lot yesterday after everything that happened on Monday. Maryland's double overtime win, as well as the Juju Watkins terrible injury. So we covered that yesterday. Men's tournament, obviously, we're waiting to get back going tomorrow. Nats opening day is tomorrow. So there's that. But football-wise, we got a couple of stories we're going to talk about here off the top. But this is kind of, in some ways, the day that we think of in the middle of the offseason, or in the middle of the season, where you're like, man, I'd love to do something a little bit different during the offseason. I love to take an opportunity. If we ever get space to like flush out a topic, let's flush out a topic. And so the 5 o'clock hour is going to sound a little bit different today. Earlier, Sam Fortier, Washington Post, my good friend, came over to my house where I have a home studio. And we talked about team building, especially through the ownership lens, for a literal hour. I think the recording is like 56 minutes. And we're going to release the full thing as a podcast that you can listen to straight through. So if you cannot listen, or you're not going to still be in your car, or whatever it is by 5 o'clock, don't worry. We'll get you the entire thing uninterrupted at some point within the next 24 hours once we get the full thing edited. But we're going to share with you the first two chunks of that conversation during the 5 o'clock hour today. And it was a really fascinating conversation. Those of you that have heard Sam on the show and or read Sam's work, you know he's a super, super smart guy who thinks very deeply and very critically about a lot of different things. And he's covered Major League Baseball. Obviously, he was on the Nats beat for the Post. He's also covered the Chargers back for the LA Times. And then he worked for The Ringer covering the NFL writ large before he came to the Washington Post. So like he's got some different perspectives, and his life as a reporter. I obviously have covered both as a reporter and now as a talk show host for multiple years. And we just had a really great conversation about team building in the NFL, specifically in the NFL, but some of the things obviously apply to other leagues as well. So that'll be coming up at 5 o'clock today. Really looking forward to sharing that with you. Really enjoyed having Sam over and doing that. And it's something, you know, we hit stop and we looked at each other and we're like, we got to do that more often. We got to find more stuff to talk about. So Sam's already committed to coming more on the show in long form ways. And it's fun. Like, this is the age we're in. People like having big, deep, long conversations. So we'll put that in the Hoffman Show podcast feed in full, but you don't have to go searching for it. We're going to play a couple big chunks for you on the radio here at 5 o'clock. That said, what do you do on a day where there's not really a top story outside of have one of your friends come over and record a really fun, high-level conversation about something you don't have time to do during the season? You talk about your division rival that is scrambling seemingly at quarterback. The New York Giants, right at the end of our show yesterday, signed Russell Wilson to what was at first advertised as a one-year, $21 million deal. In reality, it is a one-year, $10.5 million deal. And Russell Wilson is getting what is basically backup money. If you want to look at, for instance, for comparison purposes, Marcus Mariota, the last 2 years from the Washington Commanders, his cap number was an identical 8.2, or sorry, this year it'll be 8.28 million. Last year he made, where's the actual cap number? Paid on cap, $6 million. So definitely high-end backup money, but there are other backups in the league making closer to that $10 million range. I think last year Jacoby Brissett got in that $10 million range for the New England Patriots, kind of in a similar situation. In a, hey, we'll let you be the starter to start, and if you play well enough, obviously you get to keep it. And if not, then we're going to draft a rookie, and that guy will be our starting quarterback. And it's a TBD for the Giants. I think they would love to get up to one and take Cam Ward. Now, I think that they've strengthened their bargaining position where they're not looking at, 2 weeks ago they had no one. Now they have Jameis Winston, who I want to talk about more in a second, and they have Russ, and now they can look at the Tennessee Titans and be like, look, here's our price. If we have to go into the season with Russell Wilson, like, we're fine. We'll pick someone next year in hopefully a better QB class. Or we'll find another way. We'll take someone later. We'll trade back into the first round and get a Jackson Dart, or we'll take the Louisville kid, or Kyle McCord in the third round out of Syracuse. Like, we'll find someone to be our rookie that we take a shot on. But like, we've got two veterans. We feel like, and by we, I'm talking specifically Brian Dable and Joe Shane, because those are two guys that are fighting for their jobs. And frankly, if they can't at least prove some type of proof of concept with the combination of Jameis and Russ, then they probably don't actually belong in the jobs. Like, if you can't surround Jameis and or Russ with enough talent to win like 6 games, and show some level of competency and be like, look, when it was good, when we had real quarterback play, as long as the losses are like in large part thanks to the quarterback, right? Can you show, well, in the days where Russ was looking like old Russ, or when Jameis played and he was on, look what our offense looked like. Look at how our playmakers shine. Look at how Darius Slayton, who we brought back, compliments Malik Neighbors. Look at our second-year running back, Tyrone Tracy. Our offensive line didn't look like a mess. Like, look at all this stuff. And if it doesn't, then you got a problem. And I think especially if you can get, whether it's Dart, the Louisville kid whose name I'm totally forgetting. So apologies to him. Shuck. Thank you, Max. Shuck from Louisville. I knew it was a sh sound, and I literally, that was just stuck on the tip of my tongue.
And it's not spelled like Shuck either.
That's the thing. You get it. Max in for Anthony today, by the way. Currently a faceless Max on the YouTube stream. Sorry, he's just a disembodied voice from above. But we'll get Max's beautiful beard on the Instagram or on the YouTube here shortly. Yeah, it's not spelled right. I mean, it's spelled right, but it's not spelled phonetically, and it's a whole deal. But like, I could also see them taking a flyer on like a Jalen Milroe, probably top of the third round, not top of the second. I also don't know if the Giants have extra picks in the second round, but like, if I'm Brian Dable and the way I got this job was working with Josh Allen, I'm seeing what I can do with Jalen Milroe. Hey, Jalen, we're going to get you Malik Neighbors to throw to. And by the end of the year, we're hoping in the last 4 games, you run enough and show enough promise by throwing fade balls to Malik Neighbors that we'll be here to coach you in 2026. Like, I could see that. It's why I actually thought like Jameis, who will force a ball anywhere, like you want to get instructions on where to throw the football and have a guy just not think and rip it. Jameis Winston is your guy. There is no thinking going on there in terms of ripping it. It's a little harsh on Jameis, but also at times is it with the way that he seems to not see defenders. He just like locks on his guy and lets it rip right into the defender's arms. But if you want a guy that throws with conviction and that will force feed your number one target the ball, which I think they want to do, like Jameis, I thought actually was a smart signing, and I didn't think that anyone could be considered a smart, or any team could sign Jameis Winston and have it be considered a smart signing. But we'll see. And I think it's a really interesting move in the division. And I think from the Commanders' perspective, it's kind of a pain in the ass. Like the Giants are going to be just like with Dexter Lawrence on defense, some of the other guys they get, especially if they go draft Abdul Carter or get Travis Hunter, like they're going to be good enough on defense that they're annoying, which it was true last year that, while the Commanders did a really good job in the second game, that first game was rough. Obviously, they could not get in the end zone. And the Giants have some really good players on that side of the ball that will be in the second year of this system. And then on offense, if they're just potent, they're a team that, Daniel Jones wouldn't really push the ball down the field against most teams. Obviously, he had that really nice run where he was a superhero against the Commanders for a while. But their guys didn't really get it. They couldn't block it up, nor could they get the ball down the field at all. So they weren't that dangerous offensively, despite the fact that Neighbors is a monster. With Russ, who just, that dude will chuck it deep. Go ball after go ball. That's what he does. Middle of the field. Don't even bother covering it. Just put all your resources on the outside because that's where the ball's going. And then Jameis, who will sling the ball all over the lot to anybody who wants to catch it. The Giants could be annoying this year. I don't think they're going to be good, but on any given week, if they click, if Russ has a good week or Jameis has a good week, like they could beat, I don't say anybody, but also, Jameis has a 5-touchdown day. Who knows? Russ is just on it with the deep balls, throws 4 of them. Like, who knows? It's the NFL. These things happen. So, I'm intrigued by what the Giants are doing. But I also don't know that it's a great team-building strategy, which brings us to the other team left with a vacant seat and one quarterback left to fill it, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. On a day where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about team building, what exactly do the Steelers want to do? What are they trying to do? And how does what the Giants did affect them in the long term as, the NFC East tries to stack up to take on an Eagles team that's still got a lot of youth and a Commanders team that's got the best quarterback in the conference who's only entering year 2. We'll discuss both of those things next here on the Team 980. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 4:30, we will get into the wildest mock draft I think I've seen of this cycle. Bucky Brooks, who I like a lot, is really smart. He spends the time. He just has a different view of this draft than a lot of other folks. This is what's really fun about draft season is, like, within teams. You know, this team thinks that this player that everyone thinks is a first rounder is a 6th round pick. No, one scout from that team does, and that kind of stuff happens all the time. Bucky Brooks will dive into his mock draft coming up at 4:30 that he just released yesterday. Also, some NFL rule changes that I love and must happen immediately at 4:45 before our big, fun 5 o'clock hour with Sam Fortier in studio. The Pittsburgh Steelers, though, seem like they and Aaron Rodgers are the proverbial last two at the bar, last two at the dance. Max, who is still faceless to the world on video. Max, any other of those analogies that you really like? The last two? I feel like
last
the bar
man standing, I guess.
I feel like the bar and the dance are the two that get thrown around the most.
For sure.
Yeah, I guess they're standing there looking around going, I guess it's us, huh? The Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. Who would have thought? And it's like, I guess my question would be, if you're a Steelers fan, is like, do you even want this? Like at this point in their careers, how much different are Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers? Mason Rudolph is the current number one line QB there. Aaron Rodgers, the seemingly will be if he wants to be there and they can find a number that works. And the answer is there's still there's definitely with the way Rodgers played at the end of last year. And I am fully aware that I am a gigantic Aaron Rodgers hater, something that he has earned. But like, he's better than Mason Rudolph. And when he got, at the end of last year, a little bit farther removed from the Achilles, Devontae's there. Like, they had some big production days, and he looked more competent. But, like, it still wasn't good. And if we're talking about the 25th versus the 38th best quarterback in the league, yes, the 25th is way better. But, like, at what cost? And I would argue that the stuff that comes with Aaron Rodgers, the fact that even if you think you can control it for a year, like, he's not your franchise guy, he understands the score, it's a one-year deal, you're Mike Tomlin, you're the Steelers, blah, blah, blah. We have Cam Hayward as our enforcer in the locker room. You can say all that stuff. Like, if it goes sideways, he's not going to be very fun to deal with. And even if it doesn't go sideways, like, who knows what he might do or say on Pat McAfee's show, or the possibilities are endless. That's kind of the Aaron Rodgers experience. And if you're getting the 10th best quarterback in the league, or for a long stretch of his career, the first, second, or third best quarterback in the league, that's a calculation worth making. For the 25th best quarterback in the league, I don't know that it is. I might just have a nice, quiet 38th best quarterback and some young guy who's hopefully chomping at the bit. No chance of poison in the locker room. And we're gonna roll on with that. I think I'd rather do that. I 100% know. Because then the other part of this is, can you win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers in 2025/26 when this actual Super Bowl would be played? Can you win one this season? Because if the answer is yes, and you think you can mitigate some of the other stuff and or deal with it, maybe you don't. You're just like, Aaron's going to Aaron, and we're going to deal with it. Okay, fine. Like, if that's how you want to approach it, because you think you can win a Super Bowl, and that's a calculation that I think is up to each owner, each GM, each head coach, and frankly, each fan rooting for, is to be like, do I want to root for the wacky guy, or do I kind of hope that he fails, even though he's on my team now? Fans can make that individual decision, but if you make the decision that we would like to win football games, that's not an irrational decision. That's the kind of the point of the sport. Are there limitations to that? Sure, we can get into that another day. And in fact, Sam Forty and I will get into that in the 5 o'clock hour. But if you know going in that Rodgers can't win you a Super Bowl because he's not good enough anymore, then what's the point? Like, I'm sure Tomlin would like to keep his double-digit win season streak alive, and maybe Rodgers is your best chance at that. But, like, at some point, being bad for a year isn't the worst thing that can happen to your franchise, especially if you're stuck in the middle. And there is no more stuck in the middle team than the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've been stuck without winning a playoff game since the early 2010s. They constantly win 10 games, can't win 15, 14, 13. They just don't have a premier quarterback that's going to lift them to the level you need to get to the Super Bowl. And I think this particularly is hard and sucky for them because they've got a bunch of vets that are at the very end. And you feel bad not trying to maximize whatever chance there may be, however slim, for guys like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. But if you're trying to be a good steward of the franchise, there is a value in dipping for a year and finding your quarterback. And so if you have the year, oh God, what year was it? 2022, I believe, where the Eagles were bad. They fired Doug Peterson, and then they wound up trading back in the draft, still getting, with their first pick, Devontae Smith. Like, nothing wrong with that. Not a thing at all. And so I think that is the calculation I'd be making if I were the Steelers is, if we like someone this year, am I trading up and taking Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or whoever of the the second bucket of quarterbacks? I'd seriously think about it. But I'm also keeping open the option of just being like, you want to know what? Mason Rudolph's our guy. If we win 6 games, we win 6 games, and we'll go next year. And frankly, if you take Jackson Dart and he doesn't work out and you just at 21, or you take one of these guys in the second round, our guy Shook out of Louisville, you take him in the second round, it doesn't work out, you just draft someone next year when you stink. That's fine. Do that. But this is the thing, that if you get too short-sighted on the team building and you go, okay, who's the best quarterback we can get in 2025? We are now at the point where the best quarterback we can get is Aaron Rodgers. For what? And this, I would say this, by the way, if Rodgers had signed in New York and Russell Wilson was, looking at a return to Pittsburgh, I would say kind of the same thing. I mean, at least with Russ in Pittsburgh, there's a chance for some year 2 familiarity with Arthur Smith and some growth in the system, and he proved that he could get him to the playoffs last year. But like the Aaron Rodgers level, I would say, I kind of say the same thing if Kirk became available. Like, I love the idea of Kirk as a backup mentor guy in the meeting room who's going to help my young guy, as long as he knows that going in, unlike what happened last year with Penix. But like, once you get to that, if this is who those guys are, there's no point in signing them as your starter. None. Zero. Unless you have the young guy in place, or you are 100% are getting the young guy. But with the difference is with Rodgers, I don't know that I actually want him around a young guy, which is basically the calculation that Minnesota made of, even if JJ winds up, if Rodgers sucks in camp and JJ winds up being ready, or we make that switch mid-year, like, we don't want that quarterback room being poisoned with whatever it is that Aaron Rodgers is thinking about the world on any given day. Nevertheless, any ideas he has about football where he, is different than guys like Matt LaFleur, which is why they moved on in Green Bay. Nevertheless, what he brought into New York with him, much of which was fired and sent away before he even really got going last year. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up next, Bucky Brooks, Mock Draft 3.0, one of the most unique that I have seen. Do we like it, or do we think it's a bit out there? We'll tell you next. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, where we got Mad Max kind of in the frame now. There you go. He's gotta get back because he's got the camera in the one place.
I'm sliding all over the place.
There's a lot of stuff that's happening in that studio.
There are like 4 screens in here now.
You got 4 screens, 3 cameras.
Well, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 screens.
Yeah.
It's a lot of screens.
It's a lot of screens. But it's kind of funny because you know when you're over on the other screen over there, you're kind of other way. See, if you get that way, now she kind of fading into the darkness there, and you're just a shadowy figure, and then it's like, oh, there's Max.
Oh, he emerges.
Man, I feel like this Bucky Brooks mock draft just emerged yesterday. I saw them pumping it out, like NFL.com, pumping it out on social, and I was like, oh, let's take a look. Whoa! Have you taken a look at this thing yet, Max?
I took a little peek in the break. It's quite something.
So let's dive. Well, first of all, let's see what kind of preamble they wrote. Yeah, okay. So they just set it up. There wasn't anything specifically from Bucky.
Nothing crazy.
So Tennessee takes Cam Ward 1. Okay, cool, got it. That seems to be the direction they're going. I still think, based off of both the reporting and like just kind of how this thing goes, I still would not be surprised if they're pushing for a trade. That if them and the Giants are on the phone and like the week before the draft or even the day of the draft, we get a trade. This is the latest in like 20 years, 25 years, I can't remember the exact year, that we haven't had any first-round picks traded. So every single team owns their own first-round pick right now because there's also no trades last year of like future first-rounders. So the Titans take Cam Ward. This one is like controversial, but not ish. It's a quarterback at number 2. Just there are people that don't think Shedeur Sanders is worthy of a first-round pick at all, and to take him at 2 is a lot, but the Browns desperately need a quarterback. They've got Shedeur Sanders, and, I don't hate the fit. People I don't think have watched Shedeur, and I haven't watched a ton of him, like, tape-wise. Like, I understand who he is as a player, but I haven't, like, watched the tape. I don't know if you heard, Max, but Commanders don't need a quarterback this year.
I have.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird being in this territory.
It's great. You sit there, for those in radio listening, Max in his Sean Taylor shirt today. Very, very nicely done, sir. Shedeur's like, yes, he's Deion's kid. There's some athleticism there, but he's not his dad in terms of athleticism. He's not a freak show running around with 4.21 speed. Like, that's not who Shedeur Sanders is, where his dad might have run the 4.1s back in the day. Like, Deion was one of the most special athletes in the history of sports, and Shedeur is certainly not unathletic, but he is a pocket passer. He can really get back there and sling it with his feet set. Like, he does a good job. He's just smaller. Like, the arm is not amazing. But stylistically, the fit with Stefanski's not bad. And that's what Bucky writes there. Kevin Stefanski's work well with traditional pocket passers. Sanders fits the bill as a classic drop-back quarterback with a game built on touch, timing, and anticipation. So, okay, fine. Here's where things get fun. And I actually we did a mock draft. I do a live stream show, Max, on Mondays with my buddy Tony. And we did what we deemed the internet's fastest mock draft. And I had the Giants pick at 3. And all of a sudden, I'm staring at Hunter or Carter, and I was like,
tough pick.
Yeah. Bucky goes Hunter. I went Carter. But the more I think about it, the more, there's a great internet meme going around that Travis Hunter would be perfect because if Jameis is the quarterback, you just tell Jameis that he's a corner, and then he'll throw to him. And then some days when Jameis is having a good day, you tell him he's a wide receiver, and he'll still throw to him. So that's a funny internet meme. But I do think the idea of, hey, we have Malik Neighbors. If we can supplement him in big situations with Travis Hunter offensively, and then hopefully make him our number 1 corner and make Deonte Banks, try to see if we can salvage him as a number 2. Like, I like that idea. They've already got Brian Burns, who they paid, and they still have Kayvon Thibodeau, who is a monster against Washington and basically no one else. But I think they could probably make that argument either way. Patriots then obviously go Abdul Carter at 4. They might have just got the best player in the draft at 4. Jags, Mason Graham. Vegas, Ashton Genty. That's not the surprise, though. But there's your first running back off the board. Again, this is Bucky Brooks mock draft 3.0. The Jets, Tyler Warren at 7. That is
very high.
It is, but also, I don't hate it.
No.
Could they use linemen? Yes. Is building through the trenches always a good idea? Yes. You're never going to take a lineman, unless you're the Commanders, you do 4 straight in a row. Your mid-first round picks with a litany of other needs. But basically, I'm never going to look at you taking an offensive lineman and be like, bad idea.
Right.
Would that be the best use of the Eagles' first-round pick? Probably not. But then again, maybe.
It's worked for them before.
Yeah. Why not? But Warren is a guy that's like a bona fide wide tight end with pass-catching upside, which is rare. Dudes who can block, and also be legitimate pass game weapons. And for a quarterback like Justin Fields, let's get a guy who can block a little bit. We're going to be a run-first team, but that also can be an easy target outlet. And let's see if we can salvage Justin Fields into a real bona fide NFL starter. And if not, there is no system, no quarterback that can't benefit from a really good tight end. So the tight ends typically don't go that high because of the contract value. Tight ends don't get paid, and thus you are not saving that much by taking, especially a guy that high who's going to make pretty good money, relatively speaking, for a rookie. You also need good players, so don't overthink it. Jalen Walker, the edge from Georgia to the Panthers. Interesting. Will Campbell gets to stay in Louisiana. He goes 9 in Bucky's mock. And then's the fun one Max. You got Omarion Hampton, running back to the Chicago Bears.
Be very fun.
It's way more fun than I want it to be.
Yeah. I'm thinking the same.
I wanna smash the Bears here if they do where they would do this. Be like, how could you possibly? But this is why you do what they did in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
They've added
load up.
They've added pieces on the defensive line. They've added pieces. They went major hunting on the offensive line. They've got Rome Odunze from last year. They've paid DJ Moore. They really do need a stud running back to support Caleb Williams, especially when you look at the offense that Ben Johnson ran in Detroit. And that's Bucky's right up here is the 2-back rotation in Detroit. That was huge. And if Omarion Hampton can be your DeAndre Swift, sweet. And I don't think Detroit's regretted that pick for 1 second.
No.
Shows you the power of doing well in free agency to set a floor for your team. Gives you options. Quickly to get through the rest of this so we can get to the Commanders, who, if you'll remember, are all the way down at 29 in each and every mock draft. It is so far. I've been talking to people about the draft, and I'm like, man, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to stay up for their pick. And if I stay up and then they trade it, I'm going to be so mad.
I'd be furious.
I stayed up way past my bedtime for you to trade into okay, fine. They should do that anyway.
You're getting pre-mad, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mad personally, but also it's the move I want. It's what I endorse them to do.
Yeah, it's the right move 100%. But if I'm waiting for it on draft night, can
we do it earlier? Probably
Please.
not. Probably not. There's no way that trade's going to go down earlier because then you don't want to do that until you're on the clock if you're the other team.
True.
Everybody pick in 5 minutes, or you can do an entire first round in about 20 minutes. Tony and I did it on Monday. I mean, what are these teams waiting for? They've been preparing for months. Tony and I barely did any prep at all. We were in it for the jokes. Niners took Jahdae Barron. Cowboys took Armand Membu. Dolphins, Kelvin Banks. I've seen Banks drop all the way into the second round in some mocks. People are all over the place on him, mostly in the 20s, but he's got him going 13. Colts get Tyler Booker, the guard from Bama. Falcons take Mike Green, who could go this high, but also could be the 40th pick in this draft because of character concerns. Cardinals take Walter Nolan, who I've seen fall a lot down into the Commanders' range. Shamar Stewart, Bengals, opposite of Trey Hendrickson. That's a great pick. Seahawks take Gray Zabel. This feels high for him, but also the Seahawks need linemen badly, and he plays all 5 positions, so pick one, plug him in. Bucks take Jahad Campbell out of Bama. Broncos, here's your 3rd first-round running back, Travion Henderson, Max.
It would kill me. I really want him at 29.
Really? I need to watch the running backs.
His pass pro's crazy. For his size, it's just...
I'm not mad at a running back in the first 2 rounds of this draft. I probably would just wait, but...
Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of talent.
Pittsburgh, he's got the Jackson Dart deal. I love that. Loveland reunites with Harbaugh in L.A. for the Chargers. Packers take Will Johnson. I think we had him at like 9 to the Saints in our little mock that we did on Monday.
Wow.
So that's a steal. I wonder why Bucky doesn't like him as much as others. Amanawari, the safety, gets to go apprentice for Harrison Smith and then just destroy the NFC North. He goes to the Vikings 24. Texans take Josh Simmons at 25. That would be an A-plus pick. Like, look, if you're going to trade Laramie Tunsil and then you sign Cam Robinson, Trent Brown to one-year deals, Josh Simmons, who might be the best tackle in this class but has a knee injury that's pushing him down, and you get him to replace Tunsil long-term and he gets to learn from those two vets, like, that would be an A-plus move for the Texans. That would be, like, man, that's so good. Rams take Tet McMillan, which
Shocked
seems
he's fallen this
unfair.
far.
Yeah. People are a little more, I think the receiver market's starting to get a little bit more up-down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's definitely getting a little bit squirrelier in terms of which different receivers guys like at the top of this. I would not be surprised if McMillan goes anywhere from like 7-8 range. Like, the Jets could take him at 7 down to here. I mean, the Rams getting another big receiver feels like cheating. Yeah. He'd be their X, Devontae, or he could be, him and Devontae can play outside. They can switch between the X and the Z and then let Puka be Puka and off you go. Michael Williams, the edge out of Georgia to the Ravens. Donovan Jackson, O-lineman, Ohio State, can play guard, can play tackle, to the Lions at 28. And then, love this, Matthew Golden to the Commanders at 29. Logan and I were talking about this earlier in the week because we did a lot of wide receiver talk on Take Command. And he's like, I would do a backflip if Matthew Golden was available. Like, people think he's just a speed guy. He's got real route running savvy. Like, he's a receiver, like professional receiver. And the fun part about where they are in this draft is there's actually dudes I would probably still consider, I don't know, taking over him, but like there's other guys that I'd be certainly happy to take at 29, even at that position. Like, if Emeka Egbuka's still on the board here. And then another guy that I would love is like Malachi Starks might be this year's Kyle Hamilton, Cooper DeJean, Brian Branch, the guy who doesn't have a position, but everyone is like, I don't know, he's just a great football player and he's super productive. And then he's going to fall, and then some team like the Eagles will get him, and everyone's going to be mad about it. If that guy happens to be available, Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, to Washington, just take him. Anyway, Kenneth Grant, DT, Michigan to the Bills. Derek Harmon, DT, Oregon to the Chiefs. And then Donovan Ezeraku to the Eagles, which would make Commanders fans so mad. Ezeraku's another definite Washington possibility. Pass rusher, little light, but really has some juice to come around the edge. He becomes your Dante Fowler, but hopefully a better, more consistent version over time. So there's Bucky Brooks mock draft 3.0. And some very, very interesting. And it's just a reminder, like, how different the opinions are throughout draft season. We got our big discussion with Sam Fortier in studio on team building and the NFL coming up at 5 o'clock. Up next, some rule changes have been proposed, and I like them. But first, a look at what's trending. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Was scrolling through the old Blue Sky earlier and saw a list from Nate Tice that he put out that I guess is from the NFL of potential rule changes for the 2025-26 season. And as I reposted it, Max, I said, I cover football for a living, and I approve this message. This is the most type stuff that I can remember seeing in a while, which is great, especially in the context, I think, Max, of what we talked about earlier in this week on the show. I'm sure Russell talked about it as well, but like just the heinous review process in college basketball, how everything takes forever. And like, thankfully, the NFL has figured out that there's some stuff we can do really quickly.
Just do in 2 seconds.
Yeah, you just get in the referee's ear and you go, hey, you missed it. Let's unmiss it. Okay, cool. New York has told us with replay assist that we messed up. We're fixing it. Second down. Like, I know that is a comedic interpretation of how that goes. It's also not an inaccurate interpretation of how that goes. And so how often do we still watch these replays and go, you've got to be kidding me, on things like hits on a defenseless player, face mask calls? How many phantom face masks did we see this year? I mean, Commanders alone, we saw like 3 or 4.
Yeah, too many.
Real bad. Horse collar, tripping, roughing or running into the kicker. Well, guess what? Those are all going to be replay assist reviewable starting in 2025. Rule change proposal, or I shouldn't say they will be, is being proposed that they will be. Please, NFL powers that be, I beg of you, pass this rule proposal. Rule change proposal, Rule 15, Section 3, Article 9 of your NFL rulebook. Replay assist can pick up a flag if clear and obvious video evidence exists in these additional situations. Defensive player, if there's no head or neck area contact. Now, my question is, Max, and I don't know you know the answer to this, but you're the person in the other side of my screen right now, / the only other person I can talk to right now that can actually talk back to me. Will this include quarterbacks? I feel like no. I feel like it would say quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping the answer is yes. That like if there's no head or neck area contact on a quarterback who's made a throw and they're not calling a late hit, right? Sometimes they call a late hit and it's ridiculous. But sometimes they make these calls to, it's the head and neck area, and it's like, actually, no, that wasn't the head or neck area.
His face mask was in his chest.
Yeah, you hit him in the shoulder or the chest. And like especially the ones that are so soft. But it's like, oh, you hit the quarterback in the head, and then you look at the second replay, and it's like, you didn't even hit him in the head. Like, I hope that counts. Please.
Yeah.
Face mask. No face mask, helmet, opening contact. So now, when you watch the replay and it's obvious on the first replay that there wasn't a face mask, they'll be like, replay assist has told us that there was no face mask on the play. We are picking up the flag. Proceed to pass go and collect $200. Perhaps I mixed up my games there. Horse collar, same thing. They review the tackle and it's like, oh, he tackled him by the numbers or the shoulder pad. It was just awkward. I hate that. I don't want guys getting hurt. I like the horse collar rule because it's scary. It's in there for a reason. But we don't need to call them when it's not a thing. Tripping doesn't come up a lot, but I guess this one does feel like it should be reviewable for this clear and obvious thing. Like if a guy trips over his own feet, I guess now we can review that. That's good. I'm sure it came up in some game this year. I'm just not remembering it. And then roughing or running into the kicker. If the fouling player tips the kicked ball. That one's really interesting because I also wonder from a timing perspective, like the turnaround on that. I guess it's like, hey guys, get out there and run a play. We got the free first down after the kick. But I guess, I don't know. If the ball goes in anyway, I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, if the ball is tipped and it's obvious that it's tipped, then roughing or running into the kicker is it's only if the fouling player tips it. So if you get a piece of the ball first, then you're good. You can smash a kicker as long as you hit the ball first.
Just hit the ball.
Okay. This
seems easy enough.
Yeah. And it seems easy. The thing is, seems easy enough, and it seems easy enough to see on a quick replay in 4K high definition. Quickly. Hear that, college basketball? Quickly. Gene Steratore, take your NFL friends. Come over to the college basketball side because you somehow were an official for both. Tell them how this works. Replay assist. Ladies and gentlemen, it's only getting better. All right, when we get back, this was so fun earlier today. I genuinely mean that. My good friend Sam Fortier of the Washington Post came over to my house. We sat down in front of my microphones, and we talked about team building for an hour. It's a full podcast that we're going to put out for you as a Hoffman Show special within the next 24 hours or so. I've just got to finish editing the thing, put some music on it, the whole deal. But we went ahead and pulled out 2 chunks to preview for you that we're going to share with you over the next hour. The first chunk is just some general thoughts on how ownership, and especially through the lens of the Commanders, affects team building. Second, specific to the NFL, we're talking about cash versus cap and why, quote unquote, no one can do it like the Eagles. We will explain what that means, why everyone is saying it, and if the Commanders can catch up over the next hour with you here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. There's not really a top story today, so no, not my beat. But I'm really excited for the next hour to let you guys hear what was a really, really fun way that I spent an hour earlier today. And truth be told, the behind the scenes here is that Sam Fortier and I, of course, the Washington Post Commanders beat reporter and someone who's become a good friend of mine, we went to dinner in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine, and we were just talking about life and talking about like what we do and the way we cover things and the things that are interesting to us. And there was a couple of topics where I was like, dude, we should just have you come in studio and like we should talk about this. Like, this is good content. We should do it. And Sam was like, yeah. And so this is like a month in the making of us trying to figure out the time to make it work, because obviously we get back from the Combine, there's free agency, like there's no room to do it. And these are the kind of things that we always talk about doing. Like Logan and I talk about these all the time of like, man, we should put a pin in this for after the season. And really, we kind of went into this with a bit of an ownership idea, and we wound up talking more generally about team building as well, but a lot of it tying back to ownership, obviously with the two of us having covered the Commanders ownership change, as well as a couple of others in our careers in the various things that we have done. So without further ado, this is part one. The full conversation we're gonna put in podcast form in the Hoffman Show feed, and we'll let you know when that's up. It might be up by the end of the show today. We're working on that here. So but without further ado, part one of the conversation with Fortier on team building. Just super fun. He came over to my house. We sat down in front of microphones, and, well, this is what happened. Doing something a little bit different today here on the show. I think the third person ever in my home studio, Sam Fortier, is here.
Wow, thank you for having me. This is incredibly impressive for everyone that's listening. This studio is sick.
Thank you. I've spent probably far too much of my own money on it, but that's okay. We don't need to talk about that. We are, however, Sam Fortier, going to talk about people spending money, specifically people with a lot more of it than me. What we want to talk about today, kind of in podcast long-form form, is how much ownership really impacts the NFL, because I feel like this is an underlying narrative for a lot of the NFL offseason when it comes to everything from kind of the prestige of certain teams and who wants to play where, but also the actual contract structures, which I think has been talked a lot about in the last 18 months as Philadelphia has built their behemoth. Obviously, they've drafted really well, but the way they've structured so many things, the way they're able to keep so much of their talent, everyone's like, oh, no one can do it like the Eagles. And it's like, well, why not? So I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about sports ownership and how much it matters. I have far beyond the NFL, but considering that is kind of our shared beat here, I passed on the Syracuse baton to you as I left the beat a couple of years ago, and you've carried it valiantly, might I say.
Thank you.
When you think of like the thing from an ownership perspective that has the biggest impact on building a winner in the NFL, what's like the number one thing on the list?
There's a lot here, and I think the NFL is actually a really interesting, unique structure, because there are sports like the English Premier League or MLB where ownership has a more direct impact on winning, because they don't have salary caps, and the transfer window in the EPL, like how much money you spend on your players has a direct impact on the team you're able to field. Whereas in the NFL with a hard salary cap, it's you're more constrained, and so you have to win more on the edges. And I think one of those edges is cash versus cap. The salary cap is basically an accounting mechanism. The cash is how much money you're spending on a year-to-year basis, actually paying to players. And I think cash flow is the thing that's probably under-discussed in terms of what ownership is able to do. I think it's not probably the number one thing. I remember being in the tunnel below Raymond James Stadium when the Commanders beat the Bucks in the playoffs, and Magic Johnson was basically hyping up Josh Harris, and he was like, this is the guy that does it, and Josh Harris was like talent, culture, people. I think those things are probably, in some range, like those are the three most important things that you can do as an owner. But when you look at what is quantifiable, which, I know Josh Harris loves, then I think it's really cash spending per year. And it's the NFLPA report card. Like, what are you doing as an owner to help your team in the best position? There's also other, ancillary benefits like health and sports science and analytics. What can you do on the edges? But I do think the two main things, if you're a fan and you're looking at what is the owner of my team doing the NFLPA report card and cash spending is a great place to start.
So we'll circle back to the cap cash thing because I think that gets really hairy. And I do actually want to get into the details of it, which is kind of fun, something we typically wouldn't do on a radio show. But, this radio show is different than other radio shows. We have guests in our loft home studio. The person side of it, like that to me is the easiest thing to explain. And I feel like, I'm curious what you feel, first watching Washington stuff from the outside when you were covering the Chargers and just generally watching football before you even got into the professional writing of it all, versus when you like got here. But I think my view of it as someone who's on the beat watching the Bruce Allen era puke all over itself at all times was like, fans didn't fully appreciate how much that was an ownership problem. That it was almost like, we keep hiring bad GMs and it's unlucky that these guys suck. And it's like, no. There's a common thread throughout this. The football incompetence was actually directly tied to Dan Snyder in a way that I don't know that fans fully appreciated at the time. And I think the longer it went on, the more they appreciated it, the smarter everyone got, and the more hip people got to the challenges and the realities of how bad an incompetent owner is, because ultimately their number one job is hiring good people. And that is something that Josh Harris talked about. It's why almost nobody was kept from the previous regimes on either the business or the football side, is because occasionally would you get lucky and there's someone local who grew up, dreaming of working for the Commanders organization and dealt with the nonsense that was Snyder. Yeah, there were certainly good people that worked here. So if any former employees are listening that I know and I like and that were good at their jobs, I'm not talking about you. But there were certainly a lot of people that had no business in, maybe they could have worked in sports or worked in the organization, but not at the positions that they were. And so you wind up overhiring. You wind up not getting the best talent. And I think that is how you wind up with so many of the bad personnel people that you had in Washington. And then you see how quickly once you get Adam Peters obviously never would have worked here under Dan Snyder. You get Peters and then see what Peters does with Newmark and on down the list. And that is the most immediate impact before you even get to anything structurally with contracts and things like that.
Exactly. I think putting those people in place and trusting their judgment and kind of taking a step away. Josh Harris has that reputation, especially even from Philly. Like, you hire Daryl Morey, you hire Sam Hinkie, back to Sam Hinkie. Like, you hire a strong, smart sports executive and you kind of let him do his thing. And so I think the ability to empower those people, I think we've seen that here. It's fostering a culture of, hey, we're going to give you the money you need. We're going to do the things, on the edges that try to win, and we're going to put those right people in place and trust their judgment. And so I think that, having a clear also division of labor and having everybody understand their roles, like, hey, I think Dan Snyder putting Ron Rivera in charge of personnel executive decisions, that's the thing that, like, Ron probably asked for it, when he was first hired, but it's, hey, he didn't have a ton of experience doing that. Now it's...
That's why they were able to hire him, right? It's
right.
Like, say what you want about Ron now, and boy, have I said a lot of things about Ron Rivera. But like at the time coming off of Carolina, his reputation in the league was still pretty good. Now, whether it should have been, I think is arguable based off of his results in Carolina, but he certainly, like, without hesitation, didn't even put himself on the market and chose Washington because he got a job in Washington he couldn't get anywhere else.
Right. And so if you're operating as Dan Snyder was from a reputational disadvantage, you have to do things like that to get people in the door, or you're overpaying free agents or over the hill free agents. And so, I think we're seeing it this year. How many, Commanders free agent Zooms have I been on where they say, the money is obviously an important factor, but coming to a team that can be competitive, that has a young quarterback, that has Adam Peters, Javon Kinlaw specific. Like, I asked him why Washington, and he said Adam Peters, of course. Like, having a architect of the roster that can come in and build this thing in a smart, responsible way, players see that. And so I think that, like, to your point earlier, when I was growing up, like, watching sports, if my favorite team was performing poorly, I was just like, oh, these players, these coaches, they're making the wrong decisions. It's so much of what you don't see influences what you see, that the closer I get, the more I write about this stuff, the more I learn about it. I'm like, the line from what the owner does to the fans' experience is direct. Obviously, it gets filtered through those people, but what the owner is doing has such a large influence on the fans' consumption of the product. Commanders fans obviously know that from years here, but it was something that, like, growing up, if you didn't have a cartoonishly villainous owner or have, like, a guy who was just doing it all to try to win and is very public, that it's hard to see that sometimes.
For sure. To use the filter analogy, like, directly, right? If we think of it as like water or liquid going through the filters and like what's at the bottom, like, you can yell at the filters or you can yell at the guy who changes the filters. And like the owner's the guy that changes the filters. And to take it out of Washington for a second, one of the really eye-opening owner type of things that happened this offseason for me was I happened to be just watching NFL Network the day that the Jags fired Peterson, and they had the first press conference, right? So it's Shad Khan and it's Trent Baalke. And listening to the disconnect of the way Shad Khan sees a football organization get built versus how the cohesion and the togetherness and what's their alignment? Is that their word or the Wizards' word?
I think alignment is a Commander's word as well.
Okay, I can't remember.
A lot of organizations are using alignment now.
There's so much It's so funny because like there's so much crossover in how the Wizards and the Commanders are both doing things, except for the Commanders got the number 2 pick in the right draft, and the Wizards are very much hoping they get the number 1 pick in this draft, and they can get Cooper Flagg, and they can then have the talent. So it's like they're doing very similar things. One just has talent, one doesn't, and one is basketball and one is football. So they're very different ecosystems. But point being, like the alignment that they have between coach and GM here that is set forth by the owner who is also on the same page versus Shad Khan in Jacksonville being like, oh no, it's a positive that both the coach and the GM will report to me. And it's like, no, man, you know nothing about what they're reporting on. And that means they're on different pages. That's a bug, not a feature, my guy. And so like, I think even that level of understanding, and we talk about the hiring, right? You have to understand what characteristics you're actually looking for. And you have to do that knowing that like, there's only so much you're going to be able to evaluate a scout, right? The scouting side of the GM job. Like Adam Peters did not get into, and maybe he did with, who is it? Rick Spielman, right? That they used in the hiring process.
Yeah.
And so maybe Josh gets someone like Rick Spielman and is like, okay, I want you to sit down and watch tape with the guy and tell me that he's not a Looney Tune. Okay, fine. But Josh Harris isn't watching tape with Adam Peters being like, actually, I don't like the way you look at running backs. So like there's parts of the job from a leadership and organizational communications, that standpoint, that absolutely someone like a Josh Harris or a Shad Khan should be able to understand. But there's other parts of the job that you have to simply get out of the way of and make sure that you're hiring, I guess, someone based off resume and track record as well.
Right, and I think that's why at the Combine last year, knowing they have the number 2 pick, knowing it's going to be a quarterback and how important that position is, Josh Harris sits in on the Combine interviews and I think is studying, hey, these are the people I picked. How are they approaching probably the most consequential decision that this organization will make in a while? And I think, then I kind of shift over to a longtime owner in John Mara of the New York Giants, the kind of a co-owner, but like for him to come out and say, oh, I have been too hair trigger in the past with firings, and I want to give Daboll and Shane an opportunity this season to dig themselves out of it, or to show us what they can do. Like, I think that is a fascinating position because you're seeing an owner kind of grapple with previous mistakes, which is not, I think, a level of self-reflection you often get from people like that. But to me, like, that's a fascinating position for them to be in because now Daboll and Shane know, hey, we could have been fired last year. The owner is giving us a longer leash. We need to like really make this worth it. And so that's the sort of situation where when you're watching the Giants this year, when you're watching them in the draft, that informs the context of like the decisions that they make.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I also think that that actually reminded me of something that we've talked about a lot on the show when it comes to team building. And I think the current silliest piece of, I'm going to use silliest instead of dumbest. I'm going to try to be nice today. The silliest piece of analysis currently going is the obsession over how things are getting done versus what is being done. And I think particularly we're guilty of this in Washington sometimes where it's like, would Dan Snyder have done that? And there is a difference in like, would Dan Snyder have chosen the same path versus would Dan Snyder have made the same decisions on the path? So you bring up last year, Josh Harris sitting in on the quarterback meetings. I was fine with that because he's Josh Harris and not Dan Snyder. Josh Harris is going to know his place in that meeting. He's also going to know his place after that meeting. He's not going to try to insert himself and be the main guy, but this is someone who's been incredibly successful and asks smart questions. That is why Josh Harris has been a good sports owner, is he asks the right people the right questions and is able to ascertain what he needs and also maybe make them think about something a little bit differently. Like we've all been asked questions by smart people that make us reflect and go like, wow, okay, do I actually want to either defend that position or like this is why I went in explaining it in teaching someone about something? Maybe I learned something about that thing myself. And like Josh Harris will ask those kinds of questions. Dan Snyder will not. And so whether it's the trade versus free agency versus draft discussion, whether it's, how involved is the owner in X, Y, or Z decision. I also think that like sometimes we overrate the how and the processes of these things. Sure, they matter, but like there is also, I think, within sports beyond the money, which we're going to circle back to here finally in a second, just a pure skill level in the same way that the skill level in everything in life. Some people are better writers than others. Some people are better basketball players than others. Some people are better accountants than others. Some people are good salespeople. Some people are good sales managers. And those two things aren't necessarily the same. And I think because we just see them as a bunch of rich guys, and unfortunately still at this point, mostly guys, although other sports are starting to be more female owners too, like there is just this reality that there's going to be some people that are better at this than others. And I think that's part of the fun of like talking out this when it comes to the NFL specifically is like you look at Khan versus Harris and it's like, yeah, Harris is just better at being an owner.
Yeah. And I think that like the fascinating part to me is that especially the new generation of owners, the old family money, the Rooneys, the Maras, kind of grew up on the racetrack and own these teams because they love the sport, the sportsmen, like that's being replaced by the hedge fund guys, the private equity guys. I think, obviously the NFL is now allowing institutional capital. So who an owner is even changing. But to your point, it still matters the individual. Like the thing that's fascinating to me about sports and this new wave of owners is you cannot buy success in the same way that people have bought success in business. Like when you look at David Tepper, who owns the Panthers, hedge fund billionaire, so successful, has been really, really good, at the markets for a long time, at business for a long time. And you come into the NFL and it's like, oh, I can't just throw a bag at Matt Rule. I can't just throw a bag at X player in free agency and fix this. It's a really complicated, fine-tuned people business. And I think that like when I first started covering the NFL and you hear coaches or GMs or owners say it's a people business, I always thought that, it was a little trite. It was a little coach speak, that they were just trying to not answer the question. And now I think I appreciate to a greater degree how much of a people business this is. Because when you hire Adam Peters and you have a good reputation and then you go get these certain players, and there's always going to be a business element. There's always going to be, hey, Jonathan Allen, he's been a great player for this franchise for a long time, but he does not fit into our vision at this number for the future. Then you have to, maybe look somewhere else. But the handling things the right way and releasing him a couple days before free agency that gives him a heads up, like that small thing I think is important, or reworking someone's contract. And so watching owners who have always, they know money, but do they know people? I think that's what delineates these guys at the highest level, at the most competitive league, or one of the most, the most competitively balanced league around.
Yeah. I think the other side of that too, which I think a guy like Harris actually, and this is not meant to just say that Josh Harris has done everything right and he will do everything right forever. So everyone over in Ashburn, this isn't a free pass forever. Not from these two journalists. But like one thing that I think Harris has balanced really well is kind of the analytics, the business, the hardcore, like black and white of it all with the gray area of the people, right? And I think you and I often, I've talked about sports enough with you on and off the air that like I think we see a lot of things very similarly, and like we find data very, very, very helpful. But the thing about data is you have to understand the context of it. Numbers by themselves on a page don't help you very much. And so, like, for instance, Bobby Wagner's a really great example of this. They re-signed Bobby Wagner, and you can be like, oh, he's a little bit slower. Like, the stopwatch doesn't lie. Okay, fine. But if I tell you that defense is primarily about assignment and alignment, and Bobby Wagner understands assignment and where not just he, but everybody on the defense needs to line up, how do you put that into data? And like, I think if a coach had told me that 7 years ago, I would have been like, you're way too high on your own supply. Like, this is all mushy coach. Like, you think you're in a movie type stuff. And then the more you watch it and the more you appreciate it, the more you're around it, the more you see the truth in that kind of stuff. That like, there are truly things that aren't measured on the stat sheet, if you will, with the exception that the final score is in the stat sheet. And like Bobby Wagner's always on winning teams. Why is that? Because he's a force multiplier on everyone else. And so like, I think that fine line too, when you talk about the skill of the owner, how much do they care about the data? How data driven are they versus understanding the human element, how these pieces interact, knowing that ultimately the data will be a reflection of how people feel coming into work because they will be more productive. Are we looking, as our scouting practices right so that we're actually finding the right people? Like if we do the people part right, we'll create better data. And that ultimately data is a reflection of what happened, and that should be used that way, and then trying to understand how we created those results.
One of my journalistic white whales is I would love, and if Cliff Kingsbury or Joe Witt Jr. or Dan Quinn is listening,
guys.
like please
feel
free. But I would love to understand, like, is there a play call where the data says you should pass or you should run or you should run this type of pass? I would love to understand when a decision maker has all that data, is appreciating that data, not dismissing it, but then defies the data because they feel something in their gut, or they see on the sideline, or they see, from the booth, hey, like my right tackle is dominating this end, and like we think that Jaden like can get out to the right or whatever, the quarterback. I think that like the key is not allowing the data, like you said, to just drive the decisions. But I feel like we don't hear enough stories about the people in charge appreciating the data and then making a decision.
I have a great story for you from Sean.
Okay, let's hear that.
So when Sean was here, which this becomes extra funny considering where Sean went, right? And
Sean McVay.
As in Sean McVay.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And he talked about, I think it was just, I can't remember if he said in a press conference or where there was like me, him, and Keim talking. And of course, Keim was there because John Keim, he's always there. But like, Sean was like, we have data that might suggest that on 4th and 1, we should go for it. It's 70% we're going to get it. And especially, for us, it's like go over the left or the left guard. But we're playing the Rams this week, and over the left guard is Aaron Donald. And by the way, our left guard is injured, and now we're on our backup. And it's like the data doesn't change. The data still says it's 72%. The data is not factoring that in. We're like, that's Aaron Donald. I'm not running Aaron Donald.
Right.
And like, it's funny because he then went and got Aaron Donald, won a Super Bowl with Aaron Donald. But like that kind of stuff, yeah, I think absolutely. And then like, I think the fun thing is to then zoom out and be like, okay, how does that principle apply to the ownership level? Like, how are these billionaires who often have gotten ahead financially because they are ahead of the curve on the data, they see where it's going, like how many of them actually apply that well to football? And I think that's the hard part. And I don't know how many of them are doing it well. What I do seem to be able to figure out is that the family owner types are getting left behind, that the Steelers and the Giants and the Cowboys and like these guys that have been in it for 30 years, like I don't know that they're adapting nearly as well as some of the more innovative teams, or even someone like Bisciotti in Baltimore, who's he's been around for a long time at this point, but has always made it on being a little bit ahead of everybody else.
Well, I think it's ironic in the NFL also because like one of the most analytically forward teams is the Cleveland Browns and their GM. like if you watch Moneyball,
yeah,
like the Jonah Hill character,
yeah,
Paul DePodesta is in the Cleveland Browns front
right.
office, and like by
the
all
way,
accounts,
look at any future GM list, and there's like 4 Browns people on it every single year.
Right, like they're generally considered a smart organization, but the owner gave like the craziest contract in the NFL to a quarterback who has not been a productive quarterback. I'll leave that discussion there. But like, to me, that's ownership needing to work with the front office. And I think that everybody understands you need a quarterback, and they made that decision because they thought Deshaun Watson could be that quarterback. But that's the sort of thing where if you miss on that, like you have the potential to tank your franchise. And so I would say something interesting to me is from the Commanders offseason, and just because like that's the thing that I'm most tapped in on. But like when I see them, and obviously there's other factors at play, but if you looked at in a vacuum, Benjamin St-Juste and Dante Fowler Jr., 2 defenders, they have high athleticism scores. They test well. Their numbers look good. But then if you look at Dietrich Wise Jr., defensive end, and Jonathan Jones, the corner, like those guys maybe aren't testing as well.
Yeah.
But I think when you watch the tape, they're more reliable. They do their assignments more. And I think that, really it showed up setting the edge in the run game last year. Like Dante Fowler Jr. was not as consistent. Dietrich Wise Jr., very consistent in terms of what his responsibility was. And so to me, like those 2 signings, trading those 2 guys is a reflection not of ownership level, but of a GM level saying, hey, these guys are going to be more reliable, even if they're not as good athletically, like that's fine. We'll take that because we need reliability.
Part one of our conversation with Sam Fortier. Part two next, diving into specifically how ownership affects team building when it comes to cash versus cap. You may have heard that phrase, cash versus cap. How do the Commanders fit into that equation, and how does that actually work in practice? Part two of our conversation with Fortier next. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Part 2 now of the preview of our full conversation with Sam Fortier. Always fun. We can go 2 parts, and it's still a preview because the full thing is that long, but also that good and worth your time. Sam and I sat down earlier today. Of course, Fortier of the Washington Post, Commanders beat reporter. Talk about team building and the impact ownership has on it, specifically in the NFL. And if who you hire is the big part 1, part 2 is how you spend your money. And that's where we got in part 2 of our conversation.
Let's explain the difference in cash and cap,
Sorry.
which sounds really like simple, but probably people are like, wait, what's the difference? Like when a contract comes through, how does the cash flow work versus the cap flow work?
So the cash flow is basically literally like if I hand you $1, that's cash flow. Salary cap is accounting. So if I give you $1, I can add a void year onto that contract. So then the dollar is, split in half. Or I can manipulate the accounting by using the salary cap. And I want to use a disclaimer that I am like the salary cap is incredibly complicated. Brandon Sosna, there are a lot of people in organizations that are paid, to understand the cap. I am not an expert, but this is like I do feel like I have a handle on the layman's terms of like, this is how this stuff works.
Right. And so the easiest example always is your base salary on a given year. Let's say that the salary is guaranteed, like that's part of your cap number, and the signing bonus is split between the number of years. So if we say that I'm going to give player X the high number, right, is 2 years, 10 million, right? But we say 10 million of that is base salary split between 2 years. Okay. But we can manipulate that in a second. And then there's a $10 million signing bonus. Automatically the cap number is going to be 5 million year 1, 5 million year 2 in prorated signing bonus. That's the cap number plus however we split the salary. So we could just make it 10 million each year and do 5 and 5 there, but we could say, let's go low base salary in the first year, 2 million. Now our first year cap number is 7 million. Our second year cap number is now, I said 2 million, so 8 million plus the 5 is 13. And if we cut that player, because actually that's a roster bonus for the second year, that's how we save $8 million because we don't actually get to that second million. And then that 5 million that was prorated in the second year becomes dead cap money. I think I just did that correctly off the top of my head. I'm famously bad at math, but I think that's how you kind of get the not just cap versus cash explained in terms of like what the definitions are, but how that actually plays out in a fairly simple example in practice.
That was very impressive.
I've done
for someone who's like really bad at math. Like that was
I kept
some
the
good
numbers
mathing.
pretty simple, and we're fresh off free agency. My math brain is sharp.
To me, I would dumb it down even further because I can't say the numbers into the microphone and keep it all in my head like you just did.
I literally had an over the cap / Spotrac like chart in my head as I was doing that, and I was moving. Whatever. You do your simple version.
The simplest version to me is cash spending per year is a measure of aggressiveness. And it's easier to be high in cash spending every year if you have a highly paid quarterback. Like I just pulled up over the caps, cash spending isn't working. Jason, if you're listening, please.
We got a lot of people that may be listening. We got the coordinators. We got Jason and over the cap. Who else? Shout them out.
My mom. Shout out to my
Sam's mom, famous character on the radio show.
Exactly. On Spotrac, like if you look at the teams that are top 5 in cash spending, you got only one of them, Minnesota, doesn't have a highly paid quarterback. Otherwise, it's Buffalo, Cleveland, Philly, Kansas City. So it's easier to be high in cash spending with a quarterback. But to me, like the thing that I was looking at this year for the Commanders in free agency is Adam Peters and Josh Harris said, hey, we understand the value of Jaden Daniels' rookie contract. We really want to make use of that. We want to, come in and like really hit that window. And so to me, it's like, okay, what's your cash spending then? And so they started, free agency at 20th because they didn't have a lot of players under contract. Now, according to Spotrac, which differs from over the cap, but we'll use it. They're 15th. They have $260 million committed, which obviously will, they'll sign more players. They'll draft players and potentially like make other moves that could boost it. But like I think 15th, when you consider that Jaden Daniels not on a big contract, okay, maybe like that's acceptable. But that to me, if you're a fan, looking at where they rank in cash spending is a good measure of Adam Peters' aggressiveness to maximize this window. And I think that if you're a fan and you say, hey, like we're 15th, why aren't we higher? I'm sure Adam Peters could have, oh, the free agent class wasn't great. Or, oh, if Ronnie Stanley had made it to the market, we would have paid him a lot of money, but he didn't. So we had to trade for Laramie Tunsil, and like that contract is different. So
right, you don't take on a lot of cash on that contract because this was the last part to my very convoluted, or maybe not that convoluted example is like when you pay the signing bonus, you pay the cash right now. It's a signing bonus. It just counts on the cap in parts later. And so, for instance, Laramie Tunsil, his $21 million cap hit is different than the cash they have to give him, especially, and then like part of that is the dead money in Houston because they already paid him the signing bonus and they already paid that cash. So Washington is essentially getting Laramie Tunsil at a discount from a cash standpoint, and a cap standpoint, but a cash standpoint especially because they don't have to pay any of the signing bonus that's already been paid to him 3 years ago when he signed the deal.
Exactly. And that's why when you look at the Eagles, not only do they have a highly paid quarterback and they're paying linebacker Zach Bond, they're paying a lot of different people. Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, is saying, okay, I am willing to cut these checks to keep the cash flowing out, out the door every year. And the cash spending can go over the salary cap spending. So you'll see, a team, team spending $300 million, even though the salary cap's lower than that. Like, that's why ownership is important because like Lurie is saying, hey, like, we want to keep Zach Bond. He's important to our team. We're willing to pay the cash. And so I think that's, and you see some other moves, like getting rid of CJ Gardner-Johnson, the safety, because it's like, hey, like we know Jalen Carter and some of these younger guys on our defense or, on our offense we're going to have to pay them. And so I think what Howie Roseman has done has been very impressive because he balances the long-term and short-term, and he has an owner that's willing to spend the money. And so Adam Peters, I think in an ideal world, would get to that level where he's moving around, he's seeing value opportunities, he's taking them. But it requires everybody being on the same page, and it requires everyone investing.
So let's play that out over a multi-year scenario, right? Like, how does that actually cost? Because I think a lot of times teams look at, or fans look at it, and I look at it sometimes this way too. So I'm with you on this one. I look at it from a cap perspective, right? And I go, yes, did you pay Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, et cetera, as soon as you possibly could versus maybe potentially negotiating, whatever. But in a couple of years, it winds up being a bargain on the cap because you pay them early and then other guys get signed. And now all of a sudden, instead of them being the highest paid receiver in football, within a year, they're the 5th, 6th, 7th. And they just keep going down the list until they want an extension again. So how does that allow, how does that allow them to keep multiple players when you do that cap gymnastics over and over again? Like, why does it tend to work out that paying guys early allows you to keep the cap more flexible? And 2, why does that wind up costing the owner more money from a cash perspective?
Great question. And I think that Jerry Jones would have a great answer on this because his negotiating tactic is just like wait until
wait
the very
as long
last.
as possible and then pay what you would have paid anyway, except for $20 million more, even though Dak Prescott, the only thing that happened between when you didn't pay him and you did was he got hurt. What? Sorry.
No. It's very good.
Mystifying.
The most basic reason for why you can continue to do that is like through wars and economic downturns and COVID, like the cap keeps going up. Like the value of the media rights keeps going up. It is
Netflix comes in is like, here's a new fresh Billy for you.
It is unbelievable, man. And I am not smart enough to understand the big picture economics of like, is this a bubble? Will it ever burst? Or will it just keep going up? But so I think that the reason why teams have been less afraid of splashing the pot, basically to use a poker analogy, is like the cap is going to keep going up and we're going to figure out ways around it. Like we are going to figure out ways accounting wise. Like that's why you pay, the director of football administration or whatever that title is to understand the cap and to manipulate it. And I think it's just really, it's what tools do we have at our disposal to figure that out. And so like Andrew Wiley with the Commanders this year, like you restructure his contract, take a pay cut, or with Debo, you convert certain money into guarantees or incentives. Like you can play these things around to build the best team and to keep your cap in the right financial health. But it all goes back to cash. It all goes back to what is the owner willing to cut the check on. And I think that to kind of zoom out a little bit, a thing that I'm fascinated by is you see a lot of these old school owners, the family run businesses, they have struggled to keep up with the spending, with the franchise valuations. And so you see, hey, like we're going to sell X% minority stake to a person or a private equity firm or these institutional backers. And so my question is, where does it, like, how far does this go? Like, if you're a fan of the Steelers or a fan of the Giants or the Chargers, or the Cardinals, owned by like some of these original old owners, to what extent do they do they sell to the private equity people so that we can keep the money going up, we can stay competitive?
It's a great question, and I think it's one of the fascinating things about the Harris Group. Like, they have like an obscene amount of 20 minority partners, many of whom are extremely cash rich, and like, I don't know if you know the rules in terms of like what they're able to contribute in cash. Like, or do they have to contribute their percent ownership, or like, can Josh Harris take a loan out from, what is it, the Chilean family that's worth like $50 billion that has a whatever 0.% ownership stake? Can they just be like, hey guys, we need to pay Debo. You want to get this one? Like, which it's like when we go to lunch and it's like, hey, do you want to split the check? We're trying to figure out our salads, and they're trying to figure out how to pay multi-million-dollar football players. I don't know the rules on that.
Credit card roulette for Jaden Daniels' next contract would be incredible.
Did you see, by the way, J.I. Halsell, I think he was on with B. Mitch and Finley the other day, said he thinks that Jaden's going to be the first $90 million guy.
It's hard to imagine, but I mean, you see the contracts that guys are getting now. Like,
we're almost at 70.
But if you can start negotiating that contract in 2027, that's 2 more years. I don't know. I mean,
90 feels a little rich.
He knows more about the cap than I do. I would never argue with him about that. But I guess at some point, quarterbacks in 2010 were probably like $50 million for a quarterback per year. No way. And now it's like, oh, that's actually not even that bad.
No. And that's the thing, is like the Netflix money really has messed it up in a great way. Like, it's gone up so much more each year that, like, going back to what I was talking about with how does it become a bargain, is like, well, when if I'm the agent and I was like, all right, I want to make sure that by the end of this contract, we're still at X% of the cap, and like, we're not going to be screwed. And then all of a sudden the cap is 20% higher than we anticipated. And now it's like, you're stealing some of these contracts that are 2 years old, because you anticipated the cap being $40 million lower than it actually is, because it went up an additional like $20 million each year the last 2 years. And so it changes everything. And, we talked about this during the free agency period too, is like, part of the reason the free agency class was so bad is like, anybody who was remotely good, their incumbent team thought, okay, I'm not gonna be able to keep this guy. Oh, wait, there's that much extra money to float around in the cap? We have that much flexibility? Hey, ownership, we just need a little bit of extra cash. Okay, cool. And as long as the ownership was able to come through, so Bisciotti is like, yeah, I'll sign the check for Ronnie Stanley. What's his name? With the mustache out in L.A. Kroenke, he's willing to sign the money for Alaric Jackson, and all of a sudden there's 2 left tackles that the Commanders were looking at that are off the market. And it's like, Josh Harris is sitting there with his checkbook like, I was ready too, but Adam never came knocking, because there just wasn't anybody to spend the money on.
Right, and I think one of the advantages of being a GM, or one of the skills that you can have, I think, is probably projecting like, what's that salary cap going to be, because then that informs. I think a great example of this is Javon Kinlaw. People were saying, oh my God, what an overpay, 3 for 45. It's different than that, but like, that's the full value of the contract. If you use him more as a pass rusher than as a interior nose tackle, then I think the contract looks different. And also, if you project, okay, if we think the cap is going to do this next year and this next year, then that's a totally different contract as well. Like, looking at things not as dollar figures, but as percentages of the cap. Like, I play a lot of poker, and like, I always look at it at my chip stack as, how many big blinds do I have? Not how many dollars do I have, but like, if I'm playing in a tournament and the blind is going to go from 200 to 400, it's like, okay, like, that changes my stack significantly. So if I know that if I'm going to go from 30 big blinds to 15 big blinds, I'm going to have to be more aggressive in the last 3 minutes of when I have more spending power, or that, that's how I would play it. Because if you get too low, then you can't have diminishing return. This is not a podcast about me playing poker. So
it is now.
But I do think there is an analogy there, in terms of what is my purchasing power and what is it going to be in the future, and how do I then maximize what I have now?
No, that's the part that is also like where the Commanders are specifically, right? I don't care if they overspend on Javon Kinlaw if they want Javon Kinlaw on the team. Like that is separate than should they want Javon Kinlaw on the team.
Yes.
Right? That is a separate question. But like they got money to burn. And like one, I don't count other people's money. So the cash side of it, which is the only thing an owner cares about, I don't care about it at all. Because I, as an analyst, am interested in the team building side. I am interested in the cap number and how the pieces fit together. From a cap standpoint, Commanders have all the money in the world to play with. Javon Kinlaw being overpaid is not going to cost them a single player. So at that point, you're making a decision of, do we want to slightly overpay? Let's just use the flat numbers. I know the contract is more detailed than this, but if I'm paying Javon Kinlaw $15 million a year, and I'm only going to get $12 million of production, but the next best option was a guy I could have gotten for $8 million, even if I got $8 million of production, well, now I've lost the gap between the $8 million and the $12 million, even if I'm overpaying the $12 million worth of production, however you want to do that, put that in your AI model and smoke it, at $15 million. And like that becomes the decision if the cap is well managed of like, you can say like, you know what? We got the room. We'll overpay because we think that guy is worth having on our team. And the gap between him and our next best option is significant enough. It's significant enough that we will eat the difference in projection here, and then we'll do everything in our power to try to maybe have him have a career year and actually, wind up being a true underpay or whatever you want to look at it as.
This is, I think, the alchemy of team building where it gets really fascinating is sort of in the same way with analytics. Like once you have all the financial information, then you have to figure out when do I deviate from that, or what is the exception to the rule. And I'm going to make like kind of a left turn here, but I covered the Nationals in 2019, the Washington Nationals. They won the World Series, but they started 19-31. And I think that a really key part of like what made that team special, and I thought Mike Rizzo, the GM, made some shrewd moves, is a lot of baseball teams, because the analytics movement was so far along, were just basically using, I felt like looking around the league, using the spreadsheet to dictate, we want all these young players to have all these at-bats, and we want them to be on these contracts, and they're going to produce X WAR, blah, blah, blah. But Mike Rizzo, grizzled scout, not a Wall Street guy, like, he understood, you need veterans in the locker room. So, like, Howie Kendrick, kind of a modestly paid veteran, like, sat near Juan Soto, and, they had other guys throughout the clubhouse. And so when they start 19-31, you have sort of veteran presences who are able to say, like, hey, like, chill out, like we'll be fine, like we just gotta go one at bat at a time, or whatever like cliche they wanted to use that ultimately ended up being a truism where they get back in the hunt and they win the World Series. Like I think that veteran, like Howie Kendrick, I think was undervalued by the baseball market because he had a skill that was hard to put on a spreadsheet, which is he was a professional hitter who was a good mentor and a good clubhouse guy. And I think that another good example of this is I just read the book by Yaron Weitzman. I'm forgetting the title. I think it was Tanking to the Top, maybe. Okay. It's about the 76ers. But when Josh Harris takes over, and Josh Harris's group takes over, and they hire Sam Hinkie, the biggest thing to me was Sam Hinkie's process mathematically made a lot of sense. But if you're going to use a really high pick on Nerlens Noel, not just a center with injury history, but also I did not realize this, but the book really laid out there were a lot of immaturity concerns, and they stripped the roster down, and they didn't have a veteran who could get him to the team plane on time or to stop him from going out the night before he needed to like do rehab or things like that. And so, when they installed Brian Colangelo, who had his own problems,
eventually that didn't go great.
But I do think that there is some value in, hey, we have a lot of young, talented players. Yeah, we need veterans in there to show them how it's done. Like Bobby Wagner had an incalculable impact on Jaden this year. Right. Like, I don't even know all those details, but you could just tell in terms of preparation, in terms of like, hey, getting used to the league, like he had, and Zach Ertz, like those guys who who I looked at in the first free agent signing, I was like, I don't know, like $5 million for Zach Ertz, like he might not even make the team. He ends up doing a lot more in the field than you expect, but even if he didn't, it's really important that they're in there, Super Bowl champions, guys that know how to do it. I just think that there is an incalculable value, and it's up to Adam Peters and GMs around the league to figure out what is that worth to us.
Great chat with Sam Fortier. The full thing will be available by the end of the show today. So if say you just tuned in the middle of that, and you're like, what was that? Was that Sam Fortier in studio? Sure was. We talked for a whole hour. So you can hear the entire chat with Sam if you missed any part of it that we played over the last little bit. There's actually more to it than we played starting at 5 o'clock. So the full podcast available with Fortier on team building in the NFL and how ownership has a huge, huge effect, even bigger than you might even realize and appreciate. And you realize and appreciate a lot because you went from Dan Snyder to Josh Harris. That is available in our podcast feed. Just subscribe to The Hoffman Show. And there will also be a video version on YouTube at Craig Hoffman and at the Team 980. When we get back, just to kind of trip around the news of the day in the NFL and beyond, then 6:15, Dave Johnson joins us on a Wizards game day. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. By the way, Max is in for Anthony today. Do you like the Mad Max nickname that the Rooster self-proclaimed nickname has given you?
It's definitely not the first time I've heard the Mad Max nickname. It goes all the way back to when I was like 7 years old playing football. So I've heard it forever.
Do you like it? That was my question. I care about you,
I don't
Max.
hate it.
Okay.
It's good.
Hey, if you like it, then like that's fine. I'm not trying to tell you it's a bad nickname by any means, but I don't want to be like it's Mad Max and secretly you're like, oh god, another guy.
I'm not like that at all.
Did Chris Russell ask you, or did he just start calling you Mad Max?
He just, Chris. He just, goes with whatever comes naturally.
Yeah, he's just a man who rolls.
That's right.
Chris sometimes is a ready, aim, fire guy.
I'd say more than sometimes.
I'm sorry, ready, fire, aim. That's the saying. When you get it in the wrong order. I see what
you're saying.
That's the Rooster sometimes. Ready, fire, aim. Oh no. Whoopsie daisies.
Just occasionally, yeah.
Whoopsie daisies. Sometimes it feels like officials do that too. Wow, what a professional transition.
That was good.
So there's the NFL is making some rule changes, and I feel like we spend so much of our time bashing the NFL because they do a lot of silly stuff sometimes, or they do a lot of silly stuff, period. But as a fan of other sports as well, Mad Max, I actually think that the NFL might have the best replay system in sports the more that I think about it. Because I think the NFL has, by and large, done a good job of keeping game flow. Yes, when the referee has to go to the monitor, it does slow the game down. But the NFL is also a game that has stoppages. And so I think even like on TV, sometimes it feels like it's taking forever, and sometimes it really does. And in stadium, as someone who covers games live, like it can feel like it's taking forever. But as someone who watched a ton of college basketball this week, watched a decent amount of NBA ball, and is a soccer fan, and this is the icing on the cake.
Oh, yeah.
And by icing, I mean like an anvil on top that crushes your cake. Just imagine what would happen if like an anvil, cartoon style, just smashed a perfectly soft, delicious cake. So sad
Walls
for that
covered.
cake.
Yeah.
That is what happened, for instance, specifically to the Washington Spirit game this weekend. Saturday night, they were facing Kansas City, and there were 3 VAR reviews in the second half within like a 20-minute span.
Oh,
that was we were probably talking about 10 minutes of dead time.
That's wow.
It was awful. And by the way, the NWSL has this very dumb rule now for whatever reason. I don't know whether it's technological capabilities or whatever. They don't show the replays in the stadium. What? And so we're sitting there in our seats as fans or as press members up in the booth being like, we don't even know what they're reviewing. And turns out there was one of the goals they called off. They were initially reviewing it for offsides, and they called off the goal for a foul away from the play. They're like, oh, Trinity Rodman was onsides, but Tara McKeown pushed someone over there. No goal. So, NWSL. I almost actually just flipped off the camera that I remembered that while the camera is not regulated by the FCC, that is not within our brand standard. So I...
Good on you.
Imagine what's behind there. Nothing.
Read between the lines.
It's a fist because I'm a good boy. FCC bosses, everyone who could make me lose my job. But like sitting through that was horrendous, awful. And these college basketball reviews that we've talked about this week on the show, just absolutely horrendous. And the fact that the NFL is like, oh, we finally figured this out. Replay assist.
Yeah,
I don't care that it's New York. I think one of the silliest things. Like I have friends that love baseball, and they're like baseball purists. Clinton Yates and I. This would be if we ever really got into this argument, could ruin our friendship. He hates the idea of robot umps. I don't understand why they're not in the game.
I'm all in.
All in on the robot umps.
Oh yeah, the quick like tap on the helmet, like check that, and then boom, ball strike. All right,
If I know the pitch from ESPN's K-Tracker thing, missed a foot outside, why is it still a strike? What are we doing?
The MLB Umpires Union is one of the strongest in the country.
We can still have them for out safe calls. They can still be back there. They can still signal.
Fine by me.
Strike. But like, we don't need, it's a human element. The humans that I want deciding the games wear player uniforms, not umpire outfits.
Correct.
Not referee outfits. And it's another thing, too. I'm excited to talk about this on the women's soccer show tomorrow that I do on YouTube with my guy, Andre Carlisle, because I heard him talking about this game on his other podcast, Hey Spirits. And he's like, I want the players to decide the game. I don't want the refs to decide the game. And what my only pushback to that is the referees are always going to help decide the game. But I want them to decide the game by enforcing the rules correctly. Mm-hmm. And making sure that the game, like, you are there to administer the game, right? And so, yes, in a late game, like in the Maryland, let's pretend for a second like all the old people yelling are right and that Derek Queen traveled, okay? It's actually by rule, by what Gene Steratore said on TV, not a travel, because he was bobbling the ball by the time he fully gathered. He then took the step and a half, and he's allowed to do that. So, yes, he took multiple steps between the time that he picked up his dribble, like stopped dribbling, and when he released the ball for the shot, but there is a bobble in there before the gather, which makes that legal. So pretend for a second, though, that it was a travel. And then you have the argument of, do we want referees inserting themselves in the game? Mm-hmm. Well, you can't call a travel there. It's the last shot. Okay. Well, by not calling the travel, you're also affecting the game just as evenly, but in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, to me, like that's the thing with like the robot umps or whatever with these calls is, like, I want the referee's impact of changing the outcome of the game minimized. That's the best way I can think of to put it right now. And so if, for instance, in soccer, we can have someone in New York or for the EPL in London or wherever MLS is headquartered, wherever they are, like, pick your league, pick their headquarters, the French league, en Paris, to get on a telecommunication system with a referee and be like, hey, dingus, you missed the call. It should be this. You know, hey, the contact on Ashley Hatch in the Spirit game on Saturday night started outside the box. It shouldn't have been a penalty. It's a free kick. It's just outside the box where the contact was initiated. Great. Video assistant referee has told us that the call was made incorrectly on the field. It has been corrected to this, and it can happen relatively quickly. If you want if it's a little unsure and you have to have the referee go to the monitor, fine. Same thing in basketball. And by the way, in basketball, we don't need CENTCOM. That's probably a bad thing to bring up right now, considering the news. We're just going to keep blowing by it. Max, quit laughing. Quit laughing. Max. Thank you. We don't need a central command somewhere. We just need the fourth official that's being paid to be there to sit in front of a bleeping monitor. Like, they can be like, hey, Harvey, we missed that call. Foul was on X, or it was out of bounds on Y. We missed it on the floor. Let's get it corrected. Okay. We don't need the three referees to all look at the monitor and agree, which is apparently the standard. You wonder why we have a game flow delay problem. What are we doing? And so to see the NFL be like, hey, we know how to do this. We got a bunch of referees sitting in a room in New York with every camera angle imaginable on every game, working with our broadcast partners in their super high definition 4K cameras, and we can see everything from anywhere, and we'll fix it like that and not affect the game flow for a game that already has more stoppages than the other games? Seems like a good job. So that was a long rant to say, good job, NFL. You did something right for a change. Please, for the love of God, pass this. Watch them now, Max. Watch them not pass this, and I'm just have to take all that back.
Well, you can give credit to the XFL because they are the ones who shed light on all of this to show us how easy it is.
The DC Defenders returning to an Audi field near you. All right, when we get back, Dave Johnson is going to join us here on a Wizards game day live from Philadelphia. But first, the latest on the world of women's sports presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you wanna at Wawa with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. It's Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Dave Johnson's with us from Philadelphia, where tonight the Wizards will take on the Sixers. Dave, how you doing, sir?
You know, I'm looking at the court that says Spectrum, which is not obviously where we're playing, because the Spectrum no longer exists here in Philadelphia. But they're wearing their city edition uniforms and a throwback court. And if for people out there of the 70s NBA, Dr. J, into the 80s generation, you remember that Spectrum court, because it was instead of just a bland circle in the middle, because Spectrum had orange, red, green, and blue colors, and it brings back a lot of memories. But I checked the Philadelphia roster. Dr. J is not walking through the doors tonight. That'll be the big question, is who plays for the Sixers, because we were thinking about this matchup. You know, the Wizards, a lot of promise, a lot of young players. The Sixers were built to win now, and they're not.
It is like a terrifying tale, right, Dave? If we think about the context of what the Wizards are trying to do, and there's so much remnants of the process. And the thing about what Philadelphia did, actually, we were having this conversation earlier today on the show. I did a big sit-down. Sam Fortier, actually, he came over to my house, Dave, because I have enough of a home studio that I've got enough microphones for two of us. And so Sam and I were talking about team building, and we were talking about how Daryl Morey was actually, no, it wasn't Daryl Morey. It was someone who was covering like in depth. I think wrote a book on the Sixers when they embarked on the process. Said that like they kind of messed up the veterans part. That one of the things that I know Will and Michael have cared a lot about is the guys that have been here to guide the young guys. And when the Sixers did that, it didn't work out for them in part because some of their young guys went the way that NBA players can go, where the money and all of that becomes too much and just bad decisions are made, and then they're out of the league. But at the same time, they've also been a 50-win team a bunch of years in a row because they took so many shots at the lottery. They got Joel Embiid, and he was the best player on the planet there for a while until whatever's gone wrong with his knees. So when you take both the need to try to acquire an Embiid-like talent, hopefully whoever the Wizards get can have a better run of luck, but also some of the little things along the way. Like, what are you seeing down the stretch here for how those two things are maybe coming together?
Well, you know, I think what we keep looking at is when the Wizards make deals, they're not hamstringing themselves for the future. It is about having assets, having draft picks, and having, by the way, young players that are hit. And that includes, quite frankly, as I keep watching A.J. Johnson play, when you think about this Wizards rookie class, it contains 4 first-round picks that are getting significant playing time. But your point is well taken about in terms of we've talked about this, and I've said this over and over again. It's not as simple, and that's why the tanking phrase really doesn't work. It's not like you go into a season and say, all right, let's try to lose all 82, or let's try to go 5-77 or whatever. That's not going to get you to where you need to be. And then you're going to have to trade well. It just doesn't happen where your whole team is homegrown and of all draft picks, and that doesn't happen with any team. So you look at the Spurs teams. Yeah, we credit their drafting of Duncan and Robinson and should, but also how that franchise then complemented them. So the NBA of all the leagues, I think is in some ways the hardest to build a contender, in part because of the contracts. We talk about this, and you spend more time in the NFL than I do, but correct me if I'm wrong, but just the bonuses are guaranteed. So you can have a 3-year contract, but they say you're not performing, you're gone. That doesn't happen, in the NBA. And baseball is a whole different animal where you have more players involved. Yes, it is. It helps to draft Steven Strasburg or whatever, but you're developing so many players that nobody heard of through a farm system. And quite frankly, now we've gotten more of that now in the NBA, and we're seeing this G League business And when I say G League business, years ago when we started this, and I remember somebody coming to us and saying, well, I don't get it. Why are they spending this much money just for some guy who's going to, sit on the end of the bench or whatever? Well, that's now the G League has evolved, and it's quite frankly, it coincided with, you don't have the college as, when we were growing up, the college was the G League, if you will,
Right.
Because players stayed 4 years. They weren't 18 and 19. This is my 28th season doing this. The 18 and 9-year-olds, the Tracy McGrady's, or whoever I'm leaving out, those are rare situations. So it's part of the evolution of how you build a team. Is you also want to find a Justin Champagnie in the G League. I'm not saying that I don't think you're going to find the next superstar in the G League, but again, you don't win with 10 superstars. It's got to be a fit and a complement and a team. And the truth of that is there have been teams when you say, well, look, on paper they're going to win the whole thing, and they don't. So yes, you do need generational players. Ask Alex Ovechkin helps to win a Stanley Cup, or ask the Caps fans to have a generational player. Although in hockey, you can, I think, with the nature of that sport, and that's where they make their playoffs so intriguing, because there always seems to be some team that comes out of nowhere because of a hot goaltender or whatever, and that just doesn't happen in the NBA.
No, for sure. I mean, you can get a guy that gets hot and wins you a couple playoff games, but in the 4 out of 7 NBA basketball, the best team, as long as they're healthy, tends to win. Dave, wrapping up here with Dave Johnson. Just real quick, looking at the box score from the other night, and the number that stands out to me is 19. That's the number of shots Alex Sarr took. And I think it's fascinating to think back, because at first I was going to ask you, could you imagine at the beginning of the year Alex Sarr taking 19 shots at a game? But then I think to that infamous start to his career in Summer League last year where he kept shooting. And he went, what was it, 0 of 14 or whatever it was. And everyone's like, oh, God. And then he's turned out he's going to make first-team All-NBA. He's had a really excellent year, and he's just shown a lack of fear, especially for someone who's 19 years old. So when you've seen how Alex's game has developed, specifically on the offensive side, I think we knew that there would be really special moments on the defensive side, such as the 3-block sequence that he had in Toronto. But when you think of what he's become, specifically just Alex as an offensive player, what really stands out to you about now that we have almost the full arc of his season?
Well, it's because of how we've decided to rebuild or to go through the process, which I hate to use that term process because Philly used it. It didn't work out so well. But as we've gone through the season, we said the young guys are going to play. So with that comes confidence. With that comes, I see Alex Sarr more aggressive, attacking, welcoming contact as he goes to the basket. He wasn't doing that at the start of the season. He'd make a great spin move into the paint, get down toward the restricted arc, and then go into a fade. And this is something Chris Wright, former Georgetown player, part of our radio broadcast team, played in the NBA briefly, pointed out. He said, wow, I wish I was playing on this team as a young player right now, because he's not looking over his shoulder. He can try. Players can try things and do things and not worry about the bench about to pull them out of games. And so I think that is a good point that Chris made, and I think it needs to be emphasized. Alex Sarr is above 10. They know they're going to start. That doesn't mean, they relax at all. It's competition for spots, and they've rotated and et cetera. But, think about all your jobs. Think about if I know, and people listening to this, if you know your boss has confidence in you, you know that you can make mistakes or try things without worried about getting pulled out of a game or getting fired. So, I think that's a big part of why you're seeing improvement of every player that is getting this kind of playing time. I mean, either, if you don't go on a high trajectory when you're averaging, my goodness, 25 to 30 minutes a game, that means we've already discovered you don't belong in the league, and that's not the case with this group.
Dave Johnson will be on the call tonight from Philadelphia right here on the Team 980 pregame coming up a little more than 15 minutes from right now. Whoa, Dave, are you in the speaker?
No.
That was loud.
I'm hearing it is loud, but they're playing disco music because again, this is a throwback
70s,
to the 70s and 80s. So I should have, I still like to bring it out every now and then. I should have brought out my powder blue leisure suit, but I didn't have it with me on this trip, unfortunately. It would have fit in tonight, though, perfectly.
I think you just wear it the next home game for fun, and people that listen to the Hoffman Show will know. Anyway, Dave, have a great call, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Man, Max, Dave and I have had some real fun adventures with him being in the speakers, if you will, over the years. I think Atlanta or Charlotte, one of those two is like the running for the absolute loudest.
Yeah, that got me. I was like, whoa.
I was like, oh, hello. All right, PA announcer in Philly, you settle down there. We're trying to do a radio show. Anyway, this radio show is almost over because, as you just heard, pregame's 15 minutes away. I will come back and wrap it up with real things real people said in real microphones. A doozy. If you haven't heard what LeBron James said about Michael Jordan, that's not a fake tease, even though it sounds like something you teach a radio class with the two biggest names you can think of. That's a real tease. If you haven't heard what LeBron James said about Michael Jordan, we'll tell you next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Tomorrow, God, Max, I failed so badly. Tomorrow, Tab 99. I should have been saying this a lot more all show. Tap 99 tomorrow outside the ballpark down in Navy Yard, right across from the center field entrance to Nats Park. We'll be broadcasting live. If you get there early, you'll hear Chris Russell, like from the moon, because that's how Chris Russell rolls.
From the entire block, everywhere.
So most people know that corner of Navy Yard. Like, are we talking? Could you hear Chris if he's at Tap 99 and the door is open?
I think Chris said that he's going to be outside.
Oh, God. If he's outside, good thing that my show starts at first pitch, because otherwise Chris would be distracting. You'd hear him on the Masson broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Carpenter's final opening day ruined by loud radio host in the background.
If there's one man who could do it, it'd be Chris Russell.
And Chris, if you're listening, I said enhanced, not ruined. So if you're the voice you hear as you're getting out of the metro. It certainly as you're approaching Silver Diner, Taco Rian and all the spots down there. Whatever else is, I think I might have just said the wrong place. Is Taco Rian down there? They're down there somewhere, right?
I think they are.
They might have been. They might not. I don't know. I haven't walked that
There's
way for
a lot
lunch
of
in a while.
turnover in businesses down in this neighborhood.
Yeah, there has been. There's some delicious restaurants. Plenty of shout outs if we wanted to give them. If you're walking at like the Big Stick, you probably hear Chris Russell if he's outdoors.
Easily.
Afterwards, I'll be there. 4:00. That's when my show starts. I know if you're going to pregame the Nats game, then you will probably be inside by that point. But going to be a good time there as of 4:00, broadcasting live at Tap 99. And then if you want to come after the game, if the game gets out of hand, or you want to leave early, just come hang out, talk a little ball, whatever. And then we'll also be getting you set for the Maryland game tomorrow, because that's going to be the lead story tomorrow. Maryland, Florida tomorrow night. Very much looking forward to that. We will have a full preview on the show tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll have Naki on amongst other guests. To wrap up this, let's see. Anything else tomorrow? Not really. I guess Logan and I are doing an episode of Take Command tomorrow with Mike Renner from CBS Sports. So we've gotten to know Mike over the years. He and I actually share a totally unsports media related mutual friends. My guy G. Mike and I, if we hadn't already met at other things, we would have met at G's wedding coming up in September. But no, I saw Mike at the Combine. I was like, hey man, we got to get you on the show. Give me a couple weeks here to, unload all this free agency stuff, and then let's have you on and talk draft. And Mike and Logan love giving each other snuff. I think they text about draft stuff all the time, so that's always a really fun episode. Mike has joined us the past couple of years. So Mike Renner, CBS Sports, used to be Pro Football Focus. He's awesome on the draft stuff. So Renner with us tomorrow, and we'll probably play a snippet of that for you on the show. Friday short show, basketball following us here on the Team 980. Speaking of basketball, LeBron James was on Pat McAfee's show today. They talked about a ton of stuff because he was on for like an hour. And one thing in particular is getting traction, and that leads us to real things real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, so LeBron James. All right, I know what's happening, Max. Hold on.
I do too.
There we go. All right, we're good. LeBron James was on Pat McAfee's show today, and he talked about his relationship with Kobe Bryant and also eventually with Michael Jordan. And turns out with Jordan, the only peer or one of the few peers he has in NBA history, there's not much of a relationship.
I think it's because I'm still playing, and MJ's, we all know MJ. Even if you don't know him personally, he's one of the most ruthless competitors there is. And till I'm done, and he doesn't have to look at me run up and down wearing the number 23, and every time my name is mentioned with his, he's like, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm on a golf course. Yeah, I'm on a golf course.
Don't talk to me right now. I'm on the back nine. Do not call me. Like I said, I wear 23 because of MJ, and that the inspiration that he gave me as a kid in Akron, Ohio, that don't have much inspiration in your hometown. You look at something
Skip trending.
Somebody in sports, somebody in music, somebody on the TV screen. So like Will Smith on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Michael Jordan playing for the Bulls, Jay-Z, Biggie, and Tupac. That was like, that was my inspirations. You know what I'm saying? Like I needed that because I didn't have like
Lang.
couldn't
Lang.
do Jerome Lang.
Yeah.
He's like, they know me and shit. So like, you know what I'm saying?
LeBron James is one of the classiest individuals that we've had in sports in a long, he's been in sports in the public eye for nearly 25 years. I mean, this dude was the 03 draft. People were talking about him as a sophomore. That SI cover was like 2001. It is 2025. And the fact that MJ treats him, or there's no real relationship, they don't talk. I mean, these are mega Nike athletes with lifetime Nike contracts. Like, they should be, they're arguably the only two peers that each other has. Like, if you want to say like Magic and Kareem or Larry Bird or whoever else is in their circle, fine. But these are the two, like, you can cover 98% of planet Earth by asking the question, who is the best basketball player of all time? And you'll get either LeBron or MJ. And the fact that they don't have a relationship because MJ is so competitive that he can't stand watching LeBron. Like, bro, it's over. You retired a long time. Like, that, you're no longer competitive. You're not competing. Your time is done. You're just being an a-hole. And, like, that's the thing about watching, like, The Last Dance. And there is a part of it that you watch and you go, man, that dude was built different. Like, the ruthlessness. There is a psychopathic, sociopathic element to Michael Jordan that probably helped him win championships. But there's also a reason most of his teammates hate him, and it took Zen Master Phil Jackson to actually have him win a championship. And I guess what I'm saying is, I'd rather have LeBron James's 4 rings and not be a sociopath and have a family that loves me and friends and business partners and like happiness in my life than whatever sour grapes Michael Jordan has with 2 extra rings. And if that makes me a loser, fine. But I'm playing to win the game of life, not NBA trophies. And that's if I was an NBA player. Yes, winning is important. I'm not saying I want no trophies. But the whole point is the experience. Like, sports is about relationships and going through things together and enjoying that time. And the fact that Michael Jordan can't watch LeBron James as one of the few humans on the planet who understands what it's like to play at that level and be happy for him. And he's just like, I can't stand watching it. And there's no relationship there. That's sad, is what it is. And LeBron is a classy man. This show's over. See you tomorrow.